here are my rehearsal times for the speech. Oh, hi, I'm Heidi, and I am here to talk to you today about cochlear implants, what they are and how they work. This is my first slide, just says cochlear implant. So, as of April 2009, the Food and Drug Administration had reported that 188,000 people worldwide, and that's adults and children, wear cochlear implants. My daughter is one of them. In March of 2007, my daughter was diagnosed, she was 27 months old, and she was diagnosed with being profoundly deaf in her left ear and severely deaf in her right ear. After a 3-month trial with hearing aids, we found there was no benefit from the hearing aids, so the next step was cochlear implant surgery, which she received in July of 2007. She's now 6 years old, and she talks and talks and talks and talks a lot. She's doing really, really well with the implant. So, in order to understand a cochlear implant better, what it is and how it works, I want to discuss 3 main points with you. And the first one will be the 3 major types of hearing loss. The second will be the components of a cochlear implant and how it works. And the third will be who benefits the most from a cochlear implant. So there are 3 types of hearing loss, major types of hearing loss: conductive, sensorineural, and mixed. According to Cochlear Americas, who's a leading manufacturer in cochlear implants, all 3 of these can be treated with cochlear implants depending on the degree of hearing loss. So the first one, conductive hearing loss, is more of a physical damage to the inner or outer ear. It means if the eardrum is damaged or the bones inside your ear, which we know is the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, if they're damaged, you will have a degree of hearing loss, depending on the damage. That you'll know how severe it is. The second is sensorineural hearing loss, and that's the most common type of hearing loss. That's what my daughter has. And that deals with the middle ear, which is the cochlea and the auditory nerve stem. So when there's damage to the cochlea or damage to the auditory nerve stem, which sends the sounds to the brain for processing, you'll have sensorineural damage. Mixed hearing loss is just a combination of conductive and sensorineural hearing loss. So you could have a damaged eardrum and cochlea damage, but it's just a combination of both. And I want to just show you, this is a diagram of a healthy cochlea. And since sensorineural is the most common type of hearing loss, most of the people who have cochlear implants have this type of loss, the sensorineural. And one of the most common damage to the cochlea is cilia and electrode damage. So here you have the cochlea. Along this white line runs thousands and thousands of tiny hairs called cilia. And then along this outside line you have electrodes. So when sound enters the ear as a vibration, the cilia picks it up, transfers it to the electrodes, which send it to the auditory nerve into the brain. When you have sensorineural damage, you have, in the case of my daughter, she has no cilia. Hers were completely damaged at birth. So there's nothing to pick up the sound to turn it into the electrical impulse into the auditory nerve. So, this is a picture, very large picture, of an implanted child with a cool little diagram of what's going on inside. So I'm going to explain to you the components of the implant. It has 2 pieces, internal and external. So it's a little hard to see, I don't know if you guys can see it, but back here is a microphone. They're typically worn behind the ear, but not always. He has, this is just a grip to keep it on his ear. My daughter doesn't have one of those. So the external piece is the microphone, which is also attached to the sound processor, which controls the volume, the frequency, the program of the implant. And then up here is attached to a magnet. There's a coil that runs here. This is a magnet receiver that receives the sounds that come in through the microphone, travel up the coil to the internal magnet, to the external magnet. The internal magnet keeps the external magnet on the head, and that is also a receiver that picks up the sound. And then there's 2 kind of rubbery threads that finish off the job, basically. The sound comes up through the coil, the external magnet transfers to the internal magnet, which then brings the sound down this thread, and it meets with this thread. During the surgery, this thread is threaded through the cochlea and it takes the place of the cilia and the electrodes. So it's basically, instead of sound vibrations, it turns it immediately into electronic stimulation, sends it to the auditory nerve into the brain. And it's a instantaneous hearing, it's not a delayed hearing. Okay, so the people who benefit the most from cochlear implants, both children and adults do, but the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, the NIDCD, they have done research that shows children benefit the most when they are implanted early in life, between the ages of 2 and 6. Adults who have lost their hearing later in life also benefit greatly because they can rely on their memory of sound. Adults who are born deaf and get the implant later in life tend to have the least success rate with the implants. So the future of cochlear implants is very bright. There are constantly advances being made, upgrades being made to the speech processors. And I just want to now just summarize my 3 main facts, that there are 3 major types of hearing loss: conductive, sensorineural, and mixed, and they can all be treated with cochlear implants. Cochlear implant is a device that uses internal electronic stimulation and an external electronic hearing device to restore hearing in deaf individuals. And both children and adults can benefit from cochlear implants, but it has been found that the younger an individual is at the time of implantation, the higher the success rate. And that's about it. Like I said, my daughter's doing very well with her implant, and I want to thank you guys for letting me come and talk to you, and I hope you all enjoyed learning about cochlear implants.
Yeah,
thank you. Questions?
Well, you gave me, I have a question here. Has your daughter had any issues, but you said she hasn't had any issues with the implant?
With her language, no. The only issues she has had is when an implant is implanted, the rubber threads hold 3 sets of electrodes. My daughter lost a set, which they put an extra set in there because a lot of times one set will not function right. So she lost a set, which was fine. They turned it off and they readjusted the other 2 sets of electrodes. In the future, the problem will be if she loses any more, it'll have to come out and she'll be reimplanted.
I just have one more question. After her surgery, was she in a lot of pain?
Well, she was 2 and a half. She didn't speak at the time. She was like screaming just all the time. Her surgery was done about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 6 o'clock the next morning, she was running around like nothing happened. I mean, she didn't take any pain medication. I mean, it was tender at the site of the incision, but she's a tough kid, but it's not, they make a small incision, so it's not like, this huge, half your head is gone kind of thing, which is good.
Why did you choose to have this as opposed to her just being a
deaf
child? I have a sister who's deaf, so I don't know if my parents would have opted for this. It wasn't out back then. They might have, but why did you choose?
I just felt, growing up in the hearing world, I felt if I could give my daughter the chance to hear, make life a little bit easier for her. I know a lot of deaf people that are candidates for cochlear implants, they don't want them. My decision was, if I can give her the ability to hear, I want it.
And the last question is, do you think the reason why adults who were born deaf, who have the implant done, why it's not successful is because they're just really not used to sound? Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, when you're implanted, you're basically starting from birth hearing. You have to learn how to hear. And with adults that have been deaf, let's say their whole life, get an implant at 40, 50 years old, the brain really is not, it's kind of stopped developing almost. Not that you stop learning or anything, but with the ears, you have to start from birth. So it's very difficult to pick that up, to learn. I mean, my daughter has 3 individual speech therapy sessions a week, 2 group sessions. She's in a school that has a deaf program, but this is 3.5 years of intense speech therapy. So it's tough. It's easier for the people who've had hearing and lost it because they remember what things sound like. So it's a little easier for them to pick it back up again. Thank you.
What was your reaction when your daughter was diagnosed?
What was my reaction?
Yeah.
Tears. Yeah, they said she was 27 months old. I knew she had some hearing issues. I didn't think it was going to be that severe. So it was devastating when I found out. And I cried, but I had to drive us home, so I had to stop crying. And it was sort of like I mourned for a day, and then it was like, all right, well, what do I do now? How do I get her help? How do I get the hearing aids? And so it was sort of, you know, it was devastating at first, but then you just got to do what you can to make things easier for her. So.
Can Cochlear implant get wet?
No, they can't get wet. Good question. They can't get wet. She takes it, well, anybody would have to take them off when they're swimming or in the bathtub. They're splash proof, but you really shouldn't get them wet because the water gets in the microphones and then all they hear is inside their head. So it's not very comfortable. Yeah.
Is it permanent or does it
Yes.
have to be redone?
No, they the way they put the magnet in, it's encased in like a rubber casing, so it stretches especially in children, as their head grows, it stretches with them. So as long as there's no other problems where like the electrodes where it would have to come out, she'll have that.
So it's for life.
Yeah, she'll have that forever.
I have a friend whose daughter also started losing her hearing at age of 2, and she just this past winter she got her cochlear implants done. She only got it done in one ear because of the advancements that are happening with it. Did your daughter get it done on both ears? Or
No,
just
she
one?
has it in the left ear. She wears a hearing aid in the right. She has to go for testing every year to see if she's lost any more hearing in the right ear. As of right now, she's 6 and she hasn't, so she doesn't need the other implant. She has one of her friends at school has dual implants, and I couldn't honestly say that I would get her another implant if she lost the rest of the hearing in the right. I think I'd just keep her with one. It was a tough surgery, long recovery.
How thick are the implants?
How thick? With the internal or the external?
Internal.
They're very thick. Like the rubber, the piece of rubber is probably, it's like this thin. I mean, I got to, play with one, not the one that went in her head, but, they gave me one to look at. It's really, the magnet, you do feel it. You can feel a little bump on her head where the magnet is, but the magnet inside is probably about that thick, so it's not like a huge, you don't notice it. Once the hair grows back, you don't notice it.
Can she fly?
Yes, she can fly. Yes, she's Superwoman.
No, I meant like airplanes, because like.
Oh, she actually flies. Yes, she can go on airplanes. Her head sets off the metal detector. Literally, could she actually fly? That would be awesome. I had my neighbor's son when she first got the implant. My neighbor's son asked me if she was an alien now. I said, yes, you better be nice to her. She's an alien.
When you have the implant, are they required to wear medical alert bracelets?
No, I have a card that she'll carry with her when she's older. I have a card that says that she has an implant because she can't, they said airport detectors, the metal detectors will go off. She can't be even in a room with an MRI machine. It would pull the magnet right out of her head. Yeah, so like I have a card that I carry so that, God forbid something ever happens to the two of us, they know that like there's certain medical procedures she can't have done. But when she gets older, she'll carry it.
You may not know this, I'm not sure. Because you opted for to have the implant, my sister and most hard of hearing people, they are considered, I don't even want to say handicapped, but they're eligible for disability, certain things benefit. Well, does that opt her out of that eligibility?
No,
Okay.
she's still considered by the state of New Jersey as a deaf person, as a handicapped individual. So she gets all the benefits. We also get really good seats at Radio City Music Hall. You do. We get the deaf seating. It's great.
I may have to start taking my sister
See?
to concerts.
You just call and say, listen, I'm bringing a deaf person. We got second row seats for the Dora show. It was great. I think we could stop taping. What was that, like 20 minutes?